What happens when a 19-year-old shows up at a motorcycle club with a warning nobody wants to hear? The Reapers dismissed Marisa as just another kid chasing ghost stories about her dead grandfather. But when danger struck in the dead of night, she didn't reach for her phone or run away. She reached for something the club had long forgotten, a secret language written in light. And in those flickering seconds, everything changed. The Reaper's garage sat at the edge of town like a relic from another era, all weathered brick and oil-stained concrete. Marisa pushed through the heavy door just after 6 p.m., when the place was thick with the smell of motor oil, cigarette smoke, and decades of leather worn into the walls. A dozen heads turned, some curious, most indifferent. She recognized a few faces from her grandfather's funeral 12 years ago, though they'd aged in ways that made them almost unrecognizable. Tommy Castellano stood near the back, his beard more gray than black now. A younger guy named Jake was elbow-deep in an engine, barely looking up. "Can we help you?" The voice belonged to Curtis, the current club president. Mid-40s, thick arms crossed over his chest, expression somewhere between amused and annoyed. Marisa straightened her shoulders. "I'm Marisa Reyes, Marco's granddaughter." A flicker of recognition passed through the older members. Tommy's expression softened slightly, but Curtis just nodded, waiting. "Someone's been stealing from you," Marisa said, her voice steady despite the weight of their stares. "Bike parts, high-end stuff. I've been watching the shop at night, and I've seen someone scoping the place out." Curtis exchanged glances with Jake. "Yeah? And who exactly do you think it is?" "Dean Hollis." The name landed like a stone in water. Tommy's jaw tightened. A few of the younger members looked confused, but the veterans remembered. Dean had left the club 7 years ago after some dispute nobody liked to talk about. Last anyone heard, he was working at a custom shop 2 towns over, barely scraping by. "Dean?" Curtis laughed, but it wasn't quite genuine. "Come on, kid. Dean's got no reason to come back here. And even if he did, he wouldn't be stupid enough to steal from us." "I saw him," Marisa insisted. 3 nights ago, parked across the street in a gray pickup. He sat there for 20 minutes just watching. "And last week, you guys were missing parts, weren't you?" Jake straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. "How'd you know about that?" "Because my grandfather taught me to pay attention." She pulled out her phone, showing them photos she'd taken. The images were grainy, shot from a distance, but there was definitely someone in that truck. "I know you probably think I'm just some kid trying to feel close to a man I barely remember. But my grandfather talked about this place like it mattered, like brotherhood meant something. And I don't think he'd want me to ignore this." Curtis studied the photos, his expression unreadable. Tommy moved closer, squinting at the screen. The resemblance between Marisa and Marco was undeniable when you looked for it. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn set to the jaw. "Your grandfather was a good man," Tommy said quietly. "One of the founders. But that was a long time ago, kid. Things change. People move on. So you're just going to ignore this?" Marissa's voice rose slightly. "What if I'm right? What if he comes back tonight or tomorrow and takes something you can't replace?" Curtis handed her phone back. "Tell you what, we'll keep an eye out. If we see anything suspicious, we'll handle it. But you don't need to worry about this anymore. All right? We appreciate the heads up." It was a dismissal wrapped in politeness. Marisa felt the frustration building in her chest, the familiar feeling of being underestimated because of her age, her gender, her outsider status. "My grandfather left me more than stories," she said, meeting Curtis's eyes. "He left me knowledge. He taught me your codes, your signals, the way you used to operate before everything got comfortable." That got their attention. A few members shifted, uncomfortable. Tommy's expression grew cautious. "Is that right?" Curtis said, his tone cooling. "And why would Marco teach his granddaughter club business?" "Because he knew I'd listen." Because he trusted me. Marisa turned toward the door, then paused. I'll be around tonight. If I'm wrong, you'll never see me again. But if I'm right, you'll wish you'd listened. She walked out before anyone could respond, leaving the door to swing shut behind her. Inside, silence hung for a moment before Jake spoke up. Think she's for real? Curtis shrugged. She's a kid chasing ghosts. Marco died when she was what, 7? 8? She probably built him up in her head into some kind of legend. But Tommy stayed quiet, staring at the door, remembering a younger Marco teaching his tiny granddaughter how to read an engine like a story, how to notice what others missed. Maybe the kid was paranoid, or she'd inherited more than just her grandfather's name. Marisa sat in her Honda Civic across the street from the garage, windows cracked just enough to let in the cool night air. Her phone showed 11:47 p.m. She'd been parked here for nearly 4 hours, watching, waiting, second-guessing every decision that led her to this moment. They could be right. Maybe she was just a kid playing detective, trying to connect with a grandfather she'd lost too soon. Her friends were probably out at bars right now, living normal 19-year-old lives. Instead, she was staking out a motorcycle club based on half-remembered lessons and a gut feeling she couldn't shake. The garage had gone dark around 10. The last bikes had rumbled out an hour ago, leaving only the security light above the main entrance casting long shadows across the parking lot. Everything looked peaceful, normal. Marisa reached for her keys. Then she saw it, movement near the tree line behind the building, where the property bordered undeveloped woods. A figure emerged from the darkness, moving with the careful confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. He kept to the shadows, avoiding the security light's reach, and approached the side entrance that Marisa knew the club rarely bothered to lock properly. Too much trust in their reputation, not enough attention to basic security. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It was him, Dean Hollis. Even in the dim light, she recognized his build, the way he moved. Her hand moved to her phone automatically, finger hovering over 911. But she hesitated. If she called the cops, they'd want statements, evidence, explanations. The Reapers would have to deal with police crawling through their property, asking questions about what they kept in that garage, why their security was so lax. Her grandfather had always said the club handled its own problems, maintained its own justice. But confronting Dean alone? That was suicide. He was twice her size and had nothing to lose. Marisa's mind raced through options, each one worse than the last. Then, like a door opening in her memory, she heard her grandfather's voice. She'd been 6 years old, sitting on his workbench while he showed her the electrical panel outside his own garage. See these switches, Mija? They're not just for power. Back in the old days, when things got dangerous, we couldn't always use radios or phones. So we made our own language. 3 short pulses, that means attention. 2 long, that means trouble. 1 short, that means location confirmed. You flash that pattern, and any brother who sees it knows someone needs help. Fast. She'd practiced it with him dozens of times, thinking it was just a game. He'd made her memorize it, made her promise to remember. Someday you might need this, he'd said. And someday, the club might need someone who remembers. Marisa grabbed her keys and slipped out of the car, easing the door shut without a sound. The electrical panel was mounted on the exterior wall near the side entrance, the same entrance Dean had just disappeared through. She could hear him inside now, the subtle sounds of movement, metal touching metal. Her hands found the panel in the darkness. The breakers were old, requiring actual physical switches rather than digital controls. Perfect. She took a breath and began. 3 rapid flicks, off on, off on, off on. The garage lights blazed and died in quick succession. Pause. Count to 3 like grandfather taught her. 2 longer pulses, off, hold for 2 seconds, on, hold, off, hold, on. The lights responded, painting the night in irregular strobes. Pause. Count to 3. One sharp flicker off on. Done. Inside the garage, Dean froze. He'd been loading a high-end carburetor into his bag when the lights started their bizarre dance. Power surge, electrical malfunction, but the pattern was too deliberate, too controlled. His instincts screamed at him to move, to get out now. Across town, Tommy Castellano was locking up his own shop, keys in hand, when he glanced toward the direction of the main garage. He almost missed it, just a distant glow flickering irregularly against the night sky. His first thought was transformer problem, maybe a fire. Then his brain caught up with what his eyes were seeing. The pattern. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. His keys clattered to the ground. "Holy Christ," he whispered. Tommy's hands shook as he grabbed his radio. The old emergency channel the founders had established 40 years ago. Most of the younger members didn't even know it existed, but the veterans kept their radios programmed out of habit. "Code signal at the main garage," Tommy barked into the receiver, his voice cracking with urgency. "Someone's flashing the founder protocol. This is not a drill. I repeat, someone is using the old distress signal." Static, then chaos. Voices overlapping, confusion, disbelief. "Tommy, what the hell are you talking about? The lights, the pattern. Someone knows the code. Get to the garage now." Curtis's voice cut through the confusion. "If this is some kind of prank, it's not a prank." Tommy was already running to his bike. "That signal hasn't been used in 30 years. Someone's in trouble and they're speaking our language. Move." Marisa maintained the pattern, her arms burning from the repetitive motion. She could hear Dean moving faster inside. Panicked. Any second now, he'd burst through that door and see her. She flashed the signal again, and again. Then she heard it, distant at first but growing louder. The unmistakable roar of motorcycle engines, multiple bikes, converging from different directions. The sound of brothers answering a call they thought they'd never hear again. The first bike to arrive was Tommy's, a black and chrome Harley that had seen more miles than most people's lifetimes. He killed the engine 20 yards out and coasted into the parking lot, eyes scanning for threats. 3 more bikes appeared seconds later, their headlights cutting through the darkness like spotlights. Dean burst through the side door, duffel bags slung over both shoulders, and stopped dead. The parking lot was no longer empty. Motorcycles formed a semicircle between him and his pickup truck, and more were arriving by the second, their engines creating a thunderous chorus that shattered the night's silence. "Drop the bags, Dean." Tommy's voice was granite. He stood beside his bike, hands relaxed at his sides, but his posture screamed readiness. Dean's eyes darted left, right, calculating escape routes that didn't exist. Behind him, the garage lights had stopped their strange flickering. In front of him, 8 bikes now, 10 a dozen. Curtis pulled up on his red street glide, killing the engine and dismounting with deliberate slowness. "I said drop them." The bags hit the pavement with a metallic crash. Parts spilled out, chrome manifolds, custom grips, a fuel injection system worth $3,000. "This isn't what it looks like," Dean started, but Curtis cut him off with a raised hand. "Save it. We've got bigger questions right now." Curtis turned, scanning the shadows. Who flashed the signal? Marisa stepped into the light, still standing by the electrical panel. Her legs felt like water, adrenaline and relief mixing into something that made her dizzy. Every eye turned to her. "You?" Curtis's voice held pure disbelief. Tommy moved toward her, his weathered face unreadable in the harsh glow of the security light. He stopped 3 feet away, studying her with an intensity that made Marisa want to look away. But she held his gaze. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short, Tommy said quietly. "When did Marco teach you that?" "When I was 6. He made me practice until I could do it in my sleep." Marissa's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. "He said it meant brother in trouble. Location confirmed. Need immediate assistance." He said it was the club's first language, before radios, before cell phones, when everything depended on brothers seeing and understanding. A younger member named Vic spoke up from the back. "What signal? What the hell is everyone talking about?" Tommy didn't break eye contact with Marisa. "Before your time, kid. Before most of our time. The founders created a distress system using light patterns, garage lights, headlights, anything that could be seen from a distance. It was how we moved information during the rough years, when using phones meant getting traced or intercepted." "That's ancient history," Curtis said, but his tone had shifted from dismissive to thoughtful. "Ancient history just caught a thief," Marisa replied, finally looking at Dean. "I told you someone was stealing. I told you it was him. But you didn't want to listen to Marco's granddaughter playing detective." Curtis's jaw tightened. He turned to Dean, who stood frozen between the bikes and the building, looking for all the world like a deer in headlights. "How long you been hitting us?" Dean said nothing. "Answer the question, or I let these guys ask it their way." Curtis's voice dropped to something dangerous. 3 months, Dean muttered. "Just small stuff at first. Figured you wouldn't notice, wouldn't care." "Wouldn't care." Tommy's voice rose. "You took an oath when you joined this club. You wore our patch. And then you decided to steal from your brothers because what you needed the money. You felt disrespected. You pushed me out." Dean shouted, finding his spine. 7 years ago, you made it clear I wasn't wanted anymore. That I didn't fit the new direction. So yeah, I took what I figured I was owed." "You left because you couldn't follow the rules," Curtis shot back. "Because you thought the patch meant you could do whatever you wanted without consequences. We didn't push you out. You walked away." The tension threatened to explode into violence. Marisa could see hands curling into fists, bodies shifting into aggressive stances. Then Tommy stepped between them, one hand raised. "Not here. Not now." He looked at Curtis. "Call the cops or handle it ourselves?" Curtis considered Dean for a long moment. "Take the parts back. You're banned from club property permanently. If we see you again, we won't be as generous." He leaned in close. "And pray we don't find out you sold anything you already took, because then we're coming for you. Are we clear?" Dean nodded, collecting the spilled parts with shaking hands and retreating to his truck under the watchful eyes of a dozen bikers. When his taillights disappeared down the road, the group exhaled collectively. Curtis turned back to Marisa, his expression complex. Part embarrassment, part respect, part something she couldn't quite read. "You were right," he said simply, "and we were wrong to dismiss you." Tommy walked to his bike and retrieved something from his saddlebag. When he returned, he handed Marisa a weathered radio, the same emergency channel frequency already programmed in. "Keep this," he said. "Marco would have wanted you to have it." Marisa took the radio, feeling its weight, understanding what it represented. Not just a communication device, but an invitation, a recognition. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank us yet," Tommy said, a hint of a smile crossing his face. "We've got some things to discuss tomorrow, when the sun's up and everyone's thinking clearly." Marisa arrived at the garage the next morning expecting maybe a handshake and a polite goodbye. Instead, she found the parking lot full of bikes and the main bay packed with people. Not just the members who'd shown up last night, but others, older faces she'd never seen before, men in their 60s and 70s wearing patches faded from decades of sun and road. Tommy spotted her first and waved her over. "Good you're here. Come on." Inside, the atmosphere felt different from yesterday's dismissive cool. There was an energy in the air, something electric and alive. Curtis stood near the workbench with Jake and Vic, but it was the older generation that dominated the space. They were gathered around a laptop, looking at something on the screen. "That's the sequence," one of them was saying, a barrel-chested man with a white beard. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. Emergency assistance. But there were others. 5 rapid flashes meant law enforcement nearby. 2 short, 3 long meant meeting location compromised. Why didn't anyone teach us this stuff? Vic asked, genuinely curious rather than defensive. Because we got comfortable, Tommy said. Got lazy. Figured we didn't need the old ways anymore because we had technology. Forgot that technology fails, gets traced, gets hacked. But the old signals? Simple, reliable, invisible to anyone who doesn't know the language. Curtis cleared his throat. Which brings us to why we called this meeting. He gestured for Marisa to come closer. Last night, this 19-year-old showed more awareness and more loyalty to this club than some people who've worn the patch for years. She saw a threat, warned us, and when we ignored her, she didn't walk away. She used knowledge her grandfather gave her to protect what he helped build. Marisa felt her face flush. She wasn't used to being the center of attention like this. Marco Reyes was one of the 5 founders of this club, Tommy continued, taking over. Back in 1968, when wearing a patch could get you arrested just for looking suspicious. Marco designed the signal system because he understood that brotherhood meant having each other's backs when words couldn't be spoken. He rode through ice storms to bail brothers out of jail. He worked double shifts to help members who couldn't make rent. And when he got sick, when the cancer took him too damn young, we promised we'd look after his family. Tommy's voice grew rough. We didn't keep that promise. We let distance and time make us forget. His daughter moved away. His granddaughter grew up not knowing the club that her grandfather bled for. He turned to face Marisa directly. But you didn't forget us. And last night, you reminded us who we're supposed to be. One of the older members, a lean man with silver hair named Ray, stepped forward holding something wrapped in dark cloth. Every founder had a jacket. Original leather, original patches, from the first year. When they passed, we kept the jackets here as reminders. As history. Ray unwrapped the cloth carefully, revealing a leather riding jacket that had aged into something beautiful, worn smooth in places, the leather dark and rich with oil and time. The Reaper's patch on the back was hand-stitched, the colors still vibrant. Across the front, above the heart, a name was embroidered in silver thread, Marco Reyes, founder. Marisa's breath caught. She'd seen photos of her grandfather wearing this jacket, but never in person. Her mother had told her it was gone, lost or given away after the funeral. We kept it safe, Tommy said softly, waiting for the right time, the right reason to bring it back out. He nodded to Ray, who turned the jacket around. Beneath Marco's name, fresh stitching gleamed in matching silver thread. Marisa Reyes, keeper of the signal. We're not giving this to you because of your last name, Curtis said, his voice firm. We're giving it to you because you earned it, because you proved you understand what this patch means. It's not about the bike you ride or how tough you act. It's about showing up when it matters, about remembering what came before and carrying it forward. Tommy held out the jacket. Your grandfather would be proud of you, kid. Hell, we're proud of you. Marisa took the jacket with trembling hands. The leather was heavier than she expected, substantial. She slipped it on, and despite the decades between when her grandfather wore it and now, it fit like it had been waiting for her. The weight settled on her shoulders, familiar somehow, like coming home. There's one condition, Ray said, a hint of smile in his weathered face. You teach the young guys the signals. All of them. Make sure this knowledge doesn't die with us old-timers. And you keep coming around, Jake added. Because clearly we need someone who actually pays attention. Marisa looked around the garage at the faces watching her. Some curious, some approving, some still uncertain. But they were looking at her differently now. Not as an outsider or a kid chasing ghosts. As one of them. I'll teach anyone who wants to learn, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. And I'll keep paying attention. That evening, Marisa rode home on her modest Honda, her grandfather's jacket snug against the cool air. The patch on her back caught the streetlights as she moved through traffic. She could feel the weight of it, the history, the responsibility. But more than that, she could feel her grandfather riding beside her. Not as a ghost, but as a presence, a legacy that had finally found its way forward. She'd spent 12 years trying to connect with a man she barely remembered. And in one night, by trusting what he'd taught her, she'd found him again. The signal had worked, not just to catch a thief, but to bridge a gap between generations, to wake up something that had been sleeping too long. Marisa smiled, her hand instinctively moving to touch the patch over her heart. Some legacies aren't inherited. They're claimed, earned through action and courage. And she'd claimed hers. Marisa didn't inherit her place in the Reapers. She earned it by remembering what everyone else forgot. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can carry isn't a weapon or a badge. It's the knowledge that someone before you believed you were worth teaching. What legacy are you carrying forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that remind us where we come from and why it matters.